The transport ship descended through the orange clouds of Prime, carrying 300 new recruits to the most famous military academy in the known galaxy. Inside the cramped passenger hold, creatures of every shape and size sat in nervous silence. There were massive reptilian warriors with scales like armor plates. There were sleek predators with claws that could cut through steel. There were hunters from worlds so dangerous that simply surviving childhood was considered an achievement. And then there was Morgan. He sat in the corner of the hold, his legs crossed and his eyes half closed. Compared to the monsters around him, he looked almost laughable. He stood about 6 feet tall with light brown hair and pale gray eyes. His body was lean but not particularly muscular. His teeth were flat and his nails were short and blunt. By any reasonable measure, he was the least impressive creature on the ship. The female coiled in the seat next to him kept glancing over with an expression that mixed curiosity with contempt. Her name was, and she came from a species of serpentine hunters who had conquered 7 star systems before joining the Galactic Federation. Her scales shimmered with colors that shifted as she moved, and her fangs dripped with venom that could kill most species in seconds. "You are the human," she said finally. It was not a question. Opened his eyes and turned to look at her. "That's right. I have heard stories about your world." His tongue flicked out, tasting the air around him. "They say Earth is a death world. They say everything there evolved to kill." "That's mostly true," admitted. "Then why do you look so weak?" Smiled at that. It was a small smile, patient and calm. "I guess we just evolved differently." Made a sound that her species used to express disbelief. She turned away from the human and did not speak to him again for the rest of the journey. The academy itself was enormous. It sprawled across a vast plateau, its buildings constructed from a dark stone that seemed to absorb light. Towers rose toward the sky like the fingers of some ancient giant. Training grounds stretched for miles in every direction, filled with obstacle courses and combat arenas and environmental simulation chambers. Commander Al waited for them in the main hall. He was one of the oldest and most respected warrior species in the galaxy. His scales were the color of burnt copper, and his eyes glowed with a faint red light. He stood nearly 8 feet tall, and when he spoke, his voice echoed through the hall like thunder. "Welcome to the Galactic Military Academy," he said. "For the next 2 cycles, this will be your home. You will train here. You will suffer here. Some of you will die here." The recruits stood at attention, trying not to show fear. "Look around you," Al continued. "The beings standing beside you are the finest predators their worlds have produced. They are killers, hunters, survivors. Each of them has proven themselves worthy of standing in this hall." His glowing eyes swept across the crowd and stopped on Morgan. The human stood calmly among the giants, his hands clasped behind his back and his expression neutral. "Some of you may be wondering about our addition," Al said. "The Galactic Council has requested that we begin integrating humans into our training program. Lieutenant Morgan is the first of his species to attend this academy." A low murmur rippled through the recruits. Felt dozens of alien eyes turning toward him, studying him, measuring him. He kept his face calm and his breathing steady. "I know what you are thinking," Al said. "You are wondering why such a small and fragile creature has been allowed to stand among you. You are wondering if this is some kind of joke." He paused, letting the silence stretch. "I wondered the same thing when I received the Council's orders. So I did some research into the human species. What I found was interesting." Al began to pace slowly in front of the assembled recruits. Humans come from a world that most galactic databases classify as a Category 12 death world. Their planet has extreme temperature variations, unpredictable weather patterns, and an ecosystem filled with creatures that could kill most sentient species. Some of the recruits shifted uncomfortably. Category 12 was the highest classification for planetary danger. Most species avoided such worlds entirely. "But that is not what interested me," Al continued. What interested me was how humans survived on such a world. They did not evolve armor like they did not develop venom like they did not grow claws or fangs or natural weapons of any kind. He stopped packing and turned to face directly. Instead, they evolved something far more dangerous. They evolved the ability to never stop. Met the commander's gaze without flinching. Human endurance is unlike anything else in the known galaxy, Al explained. They can maintain physical activity for hours or even days without rest. They can survive injuries that would kill most species. They can adapt to almost any environment, any climate, any condition. On there, they hunted prey not by being faster or stronger, but by simply following it until it collapsed from exhaustion. The hall had gone very quiet. The other recruits were looking at with new expressions now, not respect exactly, something closer to uncertainty. This method of hunting has a name in galactic databases, Al said. It is called persistence predation, and humans are the only known species to have developed it to such an extreme degree. He turned back to address the full group. I tell you this not to frighten you but to prepare you. At this academy we train warriors of every kind, speed, strength, stealth, savagery, but we have never before trained something like a human. Al's membranes flickered, an expression that did not yet know how to read. Lieutenant Morgan stepped forward, walked through the crowd of recruits until he stood before the commander. Up close, the size difference between them was almost comical. Al could have crushed the human with one hand. You understand that this academy trains elite combat specialists, Al said. Our graduates serve in the most dangerous theaters of galactic conflict. Many do not survive their first deployment. Yes, Commander. And you believe yourself qualified to stand among them. Looked up at the massive, his gray eyes calm and steady. With respect, Commander, I wouldn't be here if I didn't. A growl rippled through the assembled recruits. Such confidence from such a small creature seemed absurd, suicidal even. But Commander Al simply nodded. We will see, Lieutenant, we will see. He turned and walked toward the exit, his heavy footsteps echoing through the hall. At the doorway, he paused and looked back over his shoulder. Training begins at dawn. I suggest you all get some rest. You will need it. As the recruits dispersed to find their quarters, slithered past without a word. Her expression was difficult to read, but there was something new in her eyes, something that might have been the first faint seed of doubt about her initial assessment of the human. Watched her go, then turned and headed for his assigned room. Tomorrow would be the first of many tests. He intended to pass every single one. The galaxy had no idea what was coming. The morning alarm sounded at exactly 500 hours. It was a harsh, screaming tone designed to shock the recruits awake and get their blood pumping. For most species, this worked perfectly. They stumbled out of their beds with hearts racing and muscles tense, ready for fight or flight. Morgan was already awake. He had been awake for over an hour, sitting quietly in his small room and reviewing the training schedule on his personal. Humans needed less sleep than most galactic species, usually around 6 to 8 hours per night, had trained himself to function on 4. The first day of evaluations began with physical assessments. Commander Al explained that the Academy needed to establish baseline capabilities for each recruit before specialized training could begin. They would test strength, speed, reflexes, sensory acuity, and endurance. The strength tests came first. Each recruit was placed before a standardized resistance machine and asked to push until failure. They dominated this category, their dense muscles generating forces that would have crushed a human skeleton to powder. They performed nearly as well, their massive frames built for combat on their harsh. Managed a respectable showing. His results placed him in the lower middle of the group, ahead of some of the lighter species but well behind the heavy hitters. The monitoring technicians noted his scores without comment. Speed tests followed. The recruits were asked to sprint across a measured distance as fast as possible while sensors tracked their movements. Here, the dominated. Their serpentine bodies could strike with a speed that most eyes could not follow. In particular, moved so fast that she appeared to teleport from one end of the course to the other. Ran hard, but his time was nothing special. Several of the slower species actually beat him. He accepted his results without complaint and moved on to the next test. Reflex evaluations were next. The recruits were placed in chambers where random objects would fly at them from different angles. Their task was to dodge or deflect as many as possible. Despite their size, performed surprisingly well here. Their species had evolved on a world with frequent seismic activity, so they had developed an instinct for avoiding falling debris. Did adequately, not excellent, not terrible, just adequate. By midday, the other recruits had largely dismissed the human from their calculations. He was clearly no threat. His physical scores were unremarkable in every category. Whatever the commander had said about persistence predation, the reality seemed much less impressive. Then came the endurance trials. The concept was simple. Each recruit would be placed in an environmental simulation chamber programmed to match their conditions. They would run on a treadmill until they could not run anymore. The goal was to establish maximum sustainable output for each species. The chambers hummed to life, and the recruits began to run. The first dropouts came within 30 minutes. Several of the lighter species, built for short bursts of speed rather than sustained effort, simply could not maintain the pace. They were escorted to medical for evaluation while the others continued. At the 1-hour mark, about a third of the recruits had failed. Their bodies were not designed for prolonged exertion. They could hunt in quick, deadly sprints, but they could not sustain movement over time. At 2 hours, half the group was gone. Even some of the larger species were beginning to struggle. Their muscles burned with lactic acid, their cardiovascular systems strained to keep up with oxygen demands. At 4 hours, only the elite remained. The bred for war over thousands of generations pushed forward with grim determination. A handful of other species clung to consciousness through sheer willpower, and Morgan continued to run as if he had just started. The monitoring technicians began to pay closer attention. At 6 hours, even though were beginning to fail, Commander Al himself had dropped out at the 5-hour mark, his ancient body finally reaching its limits. Only 3 recruits remained on their feet, 2 and 1 human. At 7 hours, one of them collapsed. Medical teams rushed in to stabilize him while his chamber powered down. At 7.5 hours, the last fell. He had pushed himself so hard that his hearts had nearly given out. The medical team had to work for several minutes to get his vital signs stable. Morgan was still running. The technicians monitoring his chamber exchanged uncertain glances. According to their instruments, the human's body was under enormous stress. His muscles should have failed hours ago. His cardiovascular system should have given out. But somehow, his biology kept finding new reserves of energy, kept pushing through barriers that should have been absolute. At 8 hours, Commander Al ordered the test concluded manually. Slowed to a stop as his chamber powered down. He was breathing hard, his clothes soaked with sweat, but he walked out under his own power. A medical technician tried to guide him to a stretcher, but he waved them off. "I'm fine," he said. "Just need some water and a few minutes to cool down." The other recruits stared at him in silence. All of them watched the small human drink from a water container, as if he had just completed a light warm-up rather than an 8-hour endurance trial. That evening, the mess hall was unusually quiet. The recruits sat in small groups, eating their rations and processing what they had witnessed. Sat alone at a table near the wall, calmly working through his meal. Approached with her tray and settled her coils onto the bench across from him. She did not speak for several moments, simply watching the human eat. "How?" she finally asked. Looked up, how what? How did you do that? No creature runs for 8 hours without purpose. Your body should have shut down. Your muscles should have failed. Considered the question while he chewed. On Earth, he said finally, our ancestors used to hunt by chasing animals until they died, not by being faster, not by being stronger, just by following them until their bodies gave out. That is insane. It worked, shrugged. Most prey animals can only run in short bursts. They sprint away, then stop to rest, but we just kept coming. Walking, jogging, tracking, hour after hour, day after day if necessary. Eventually, the prey would collapse from heat exhaustion or cardiac failure. Then we would eat. Scales rippled with an emotion could not identify. Your species hunted by being too stubborn to stop. Pretty much. She was silent for a long moment, her serpentine eyes studying him with new intensity. The commander was right, she said quietly. You are more dangerous than you appear. Smiled his small, patient smile. We usually are. He returned to his meal and did not speak again. But she did not leave either. She sat across from him for the rest of the evening, watching and thinking, and slowly revising every assumption she had made about the strange, small creature from the death world called Earth. Across the mess hall, Commander Al observed the interaction with interest. The human had surprised him today. He suspected this would not be the last time. 6 months had passed since Morgan arrived at the Galactic Military Academy. In that time, he had proven himself to be a solid if unremarkable student. His scores in most categories were average. He was not the fastest, not the strongest, not the most skilled with weapons or tactics, but he was consistent. He never failed. He never gave up. He just kept moving forward day after day like some kind of unstoppable machine. The other recruits had learned to stop underestimating him after the endurance trials. They still did not fear him exactly, but they had developed a grudging respect for his persistence. When set himself to a task, he completed it. Period. No excuses, no complaints, just results. It was this quality that had caught the attention of the Academy's instructors. The message arrived on his personal terminal at 300 hours. Most species would have been deep in sleep at that hour, but was awake, reading through technical manuals on alien weapon systems. He had discovered that his human need for less sleep gave him extra hours each day to study and train. Lieutenant Morgan, report to Combat Simulation Base 7 for advanced evaluation, Predator Tactics Specialization. Read the message twice to make sure he understood it correctly. The Predator Tactics course was legendary. It was the most difficult specialization offered by the Academy, reserved only for the most naturally gifted hunters among the recruit pool. The pass rate was almost zero. Most candidates did not survive. He dressed quickly and made his way through the darkened corridors. The Academy was quiet at this hour, most of its inhabitants lost in whatever dreams their alien minds produced. His footsteps echoed softly on the stone floors as he walked. Commander Al was waiting for him when he arrived at Simulation Base 7. The old stood before a holographic projection that filled most of the room with light and color. The image showed a creature that had never seen before. It was massive, easily 15 feet tall at the shoulder. Its body was covered in armored plates that looked dense enough to stop projectile weapons. Multiple limbs extended from its torso, each ending in claws that could tear through metal. Its head was a nightmare of teeth and sensory organs, designed by evolution for one purpose: killing. This is an apex, Commander Al explained. His voice was calm but could detect a hint of something else beneath the surface. Respect, perhaps, or maybe warning. They are the most dangerous land predators in the known galaxy, Al continued. They have been responsible for the extinction of 7 sentient species. 3 interstellar colonies have been abandoned because of their presence. No known weapon can reliably penetrate their armor. Studied the holographic image carefully, noting the creature's anatomy, its proportions, the way its limbs were jointed. He said nothing. The final examination for Predator Tactics certification involves neutralizing a live apex in controlled conditions. Al's copper scales shifted slightly. You will be given standard field equipment. You will have 48 hours to complete the objective. And the environment, asked. 50 square kilometers of dense jungle terrain, simulated to match the apex's natural habitat. You will be inserted at a random point. The creature will already be present and hunting. Nodded slowly, still examining the holographic predator. What's the success rate? 17 candidates have attempted this evaluation, Al said. 12 were killed. The remaining 5 were extracted with injuries so severe that their military careers ended immediately. So no one has ever passed. Correct. Was silent for a long moment. His gray eyes moved across the holographic image, tracking from the creature's armored head down to its massive clawed feet. He seemed to be memorizing every detail, filing away information for later use. Commander, he said finally, I have a question. Proceed. Do you want it living or in pieces? The silence that followed was absolute. Commander Al's membranes flickered rapidly, an expression of extreme surprise. Behind him, a monitoring technician dropped her with a clatter that echoed through the bay. I beg your pardon, Lieutenant. The apex clarified. His tone was casual, almost conversational, as if he were asking about the weather or the menu in the mess hall. When I'm done with it, do you need it alive for study, or does its condition not matter? Because the approach is going to be different depending on your answer. Al stared at the human for several seconds. In 300 cycles of training warriors, he had seen every form of bravado, every type of false courage, every variety of suicidal overconfidence. But something in his voice was different. There was no fear there, no nervous energy, no desperate attempt to appear brave in the face of danger. It was just a practical question, a clarification of parameters before beginning a task. The creature's survival is not required, Al managed at last. But, Lieutenant, I must inform you that no recruit has ever successfully completed this examination alone. You will be offered teammates from the other advanced candidates. Shook his head. That won't be necessary, Commander. You wish to face an apex alone. Teams complicate things. They require coordination, communication, compromise. This will be cleaner with just me. Al's glowing red eyes studied the human with new intensity. You are either very confident or very foolish, Lieutenant Morgan. Maybe both, admitted. When do I start? The commander was silent for a long moment. Then his membranes flickered again, and thought he detected something like amusement in the expression. The simulation will begin at 600 hours. You have 3 hours to prepare. Equipment will be provided at the insertion point. Understood. Lieutenant, Al's voice stopped as he turned to leave. May I ask what gives you such confidence? You have seen the statistics. You know what this creature is capable of. Considered the question. When he answered, his voice was quiet but steady. On Earth, Commander, we have been hunting for a very long time. We've brought down animals bigger than the apex. We've survived creatures more dangerous than anything in your databases. We've done it with stone tools and wooden spears and nothing but our own stubbornness. He smiled, that small patient smile that the other recruits had learned to recognize. This won't be the first monster I've faced. It probably won't be the last. But I promise you one thing, Commander. Whatever happens in that simulation, the apex is going to learn something new about fear. He walked out of the bay without looking back, leaving Commander Al alone with the holographic image of the galaxy's deadliest predator. For the first time in a very long while, the old felt something he had almost forgotten existed. It took him several moments to identify the emotion. It was anticipation. 3 hours later, Morgan stepped into the jungle. Somewhere in the green darkness ahead, a monster was waiting. It did not know that the hunt had already begun. But it would learn. The jungle swallowed Morgan like a living thing. Within moments of leaving the insertion point, the dense vegetation had closed around him completely. The light from the artificial sky filtered through layers of alien leaves, casting everything in shades of green and gold. Strange sounds echoed from every direction. Creatures called to each other in voices that ranged from musical chirps to deep, rumbling growls. Somewhere in this 50-kilometer wilderness, a apex was hunting. Took stock of his equipment: standard field kit, a combat knife, a small medical pack, a water purifier, a length of strong synthetic rope, and a basic energy weapon that would be useless against the apex's armor. He also had a locator beacon that would summon extraction if he activated it, but doing so would mean failing the examination. He left the beacon in his pack and started walking. In the observation gallery above the simulation chamber, a crowd had gathered. Word of the humans' evaluation had spread through the academy overnight. Recruits from every species filled the viewing area, their eyes fixed on the massive screens that displayed feeds from the environmental sensors scattered throughout the jungle. Had claimed a position near the front. Beside her, the massive named watched with arms folded across his chest. "He's not even trying to hide," rumbled. "He's walking through the jungle like he's on a pleasure stroll." "Perhaps he has given up already," suggested a recruit whose name did not know. "No," said quietly, "watch his eyes." On the screen was moving through the underbrush at a steady pace, but his gaze never stopped moving. It flicked from tree to ground to sky and back again, taking in everything, processing information that the observers could not see. "He's reading the environment," explained. "He's not wandering, he's learning." For the first 6 hours did nothing but walk and observe. Every 100 meters or so he would stop to examine something: a broken branch hanging at an odd angle, claw marks gouged into the bark of a tree, a patch of disturbed soil where something heavy had passed. The monitoring technicians began to notice a pattern: was not moving randomly. He was systematically mapping the apex's territory, building a picture of its behavior through observation and deduction. "He's tracking it," one of the technicians breathed. "He's not running from the predator, he's hunting it." By hour 12, had located what appeared to be the apex's primary den. It was a cave system in a rocky outcropping near the center of the jungle. Bones littered the entrance, the remains of previous meals. Studied the site from a safe distance, noting entry points and exit routes. By hour 18, he had identified 3 separate water sources that the apex visited regularly. He had mapped the creature's patrol routes. He had established a complete behavioral profile of an alien apex predator using nothing but observation and patience. In the gallery, the crowd had grown to fill every available space. Even some of the instructors had abandoned their duties to watch the human work. "This is impossible," said. "How does he know where it will go before it goes there?" "Humans evolved as trackers," Commander Al said from behind them. The old had entered the gallery without anyone noticing. They learned to read signs in their environment that other species would miss entirely: a bent blade of grass, a stone turned the wrong way, the direction of a scent on the wind. They built civilizations on this ability. On the screen, had positioned himself at the junction of 2 game trails. He had chosen a spot where the vegetation provided natural concealment, and he had made himself almost invisible in the underbrush. Then he stopped moving entirely. For 3 hours, he remained perfectly still. His breathing slowed until it was almost undetectable. His heart rate dropped to a level that the monitoring equipment barely registered. He became, for all practical purposes, part of the jungle itself. "What is he doing?" someone asked. "He's waiting," Al replied. "He has predicted where the apex will go. Now he simply waits for it to arrive." The apex appeared on the sensors 20 minutes later. It was moving along one of the game trails, its massive body sliding through the jungle with surprising grace. Despite its size, it made almost no sound. Its sensory organs swept the environment constantly, searching for prey. It did not notice the human hidden in the underbrush, less than 50 meters away. Then moved. What followed was unlike anything the observers had ever witnessed. Did not attack the creature head-on. He did not try to fight it with strength or speed. Instead, he appeared from the underbrush directly in the apex's path, deliberately drawing its attention. The creature's reaction was immediate and violent. It charged at the human with enough force to demolish a building. Its claws swept through the air where had been standing a moment before, but was already gone. He had moved just far enough to avoid the attack, then turned and ran deeper into the jungle. The apex followed. For the next 6 hours, led the creature on a chase through the most difficult terrain in the simulation. He climbed steep hillsides that forced the apex to struggle with its massive weight. He crossed rivers where the current pulled at the creature's armored body. He pushed through dense vegetation that tangled the apex's multiple limbs. And every time the creature seemed about to catch him, would pull away just enough to stay alive. He's not trying to escape, realized. He's tiring it out. The apex was beginning to slow. Its movements, once fluid and powerful, had become heavy and labored. Its breathing had turned ragged. On a normal hunt, the creature would have caught its prey within minutes, but was not normal prey. Was a persistent predator. At hour 24, the apex collapsed. Its legs gave out, and it crashed to the jungle floor with enough force to shake the sensors. It tried to rise, but its muscles would not respond. It had been pushed beyond its limits, forced to expend energy faster than its body could replenish it. Approached slowly. The creature's sensory organs tracked him, but it could not move to defend itself. Its massive body heaved with exhausted breaths. "I'm sorry," said quietly, "but this is how my people have always done it." He studied the creature for a moment, identifying the neural cluster at the base of its skull that served as a secondary brain. Then he moved with a speed and precision that seemed to come from nowhere. The combat knife found its mark perfectly. The apex shuddered once and went still. In the observation gallery, no one spoke. No one moved. The screens showed Morgan standing over the body of the galaxy's deadliest predator, his chest heaving with exertion but his eyes calm and steady. Time elapsed, 27 hours and 43 minutes. Commander Al broke the silence with a single word. "Extraordinary." The graduation ceremony for the Predator Tactics Specialization was traditionally a quiet affair. Commander Al would present the successful candidate with their certification chip while honoring those who had fallen in the attempt. Usually, the hall would be nearly empty, attended only by instructors and a handful of close friends of the graduate. This ceremony was different. The main assembly hall was packed beyond capacity. Recruits filled every seat and lined every wall. Instructors who had not attended a graduation ceremony in decades stood in the aisles. Even maintenance staff and administrative workers had found excuses to be present. Everyone wanted to see the human. Morgan stood at attention near the raised platform at the front of the hall. He wore his dress uniform, simple and unadorned compared to the elaborate formal wear of the other species present. His sandy hair was neatly combed, and his gray eyes were calm as they had always been. Commander Al approached the podium with the certification chip glowing softly in his scaled hand. The old moved slowly, deliberately, as if he wanted to remember every moment of what was about to happen. "In my 300 cycles at this academy," he began, his voice carrying easily through the vast space, "I have witnessed many remarkable achievements. I have seen warriors overcome impossible odds. I have seen courage that all logic. I have seen sacrifice that brought tears to eyes that had forgotten how to cry." He paused, looking out at the assembled crowd. but I have never witnessed anything like what happened in Simulation Bay 7. A murmur rippled through the audience. Everyone had heard about the evaluation by now. The footage had been watched and re-watched until every moment was burned into memory. Lieutenant Morgan was given a task that has defeated every previous candidate, Al continued. He was asked to neutralize an apex, a creature that has driven 7 species to extinction. He was offered teammates and refused them. He was given standard equipment that could not penetrate the creature's armor. The commander's membranes flickered, with an emotion that the humans in the audience might have recognized as admiration. When I briefed him on the assignment, Lieutenant Morgan asked me a question that I did not understand at the time. He asked whether I wanted the apex alive or in pieces. A few nervous laughs echoed through the hall. His face remained neutral. I did not understand because I could not imagine that both outcomes were possible. In my experience, candidates facing the apex were lucky to survive, let alone succeed. The idea that someone might approach the evaluation with options seemed absurd. Al turned to face directly. I understand now, Lieutenant. You were not asking because you doubted your ability. You were asking because you genuinely needed to know which result was preferred. To you, both outcomes were equally achievable. He stepped forward and pressed the certification chip into his palm. On behalf of the Galactic Military Academy, I present you with full certification in Predator Tactics. You are the first being in the history of this institution to complete the final evaluation alone and uninjured. You are the first human to earn this certification, and you have taught us all something valuable about what it truly means to be a predator. The applause started slowly, building from a few hesitant claps to a roar that shook the walls. Species that had never shown appreciation for anything other than violence and strength were on their feet, acknowledging the small human who had done the impossible. Accepted the ovation with a simple nod. He did not smile or wave or show any sign of pride. He simply stood there, the same calm figure he had been from the very first day. After the ceremony, the crowd dispersed slowly. Many recruits wanted to speak with, to ask questions, to understand how he had done what he did, but most were too intimidated to approach. Was not. She found him in the corridor outside the assembly hall, walking toward his quarters with the certification chip in his pocket. Lieutenant Morgan stopped and turned. She coiled before him, her scales shifting through colors that he had learned to recognize as uncertainty. For a long moment, she said nothing. I owe you an apology, she said finally. When you first arrived, I dismissed you as insignificant. I mocked you to the other recruits. I assumed that your small size and lack of obvious weapons made you weak. Most people do, said, no offense taken. That is precisely what makes your species so terrifying. His voice was quiet but intense. You appear harmless, weak, forgettable. Any predator looking at you would see easy prey, and by the time they realized the truth, they would already be dead. Consider this for a moment. On Earth, we have a saying, it's not the size of the dog in the fight, it's the size of the fight in the dog. His translator struggled with the phrase for several seconds before providing an approximation. When the meaning became clear, she made the hissing sound that her species used to express dark amusement. I am very glad, she said slowly, that humanity has chosen to be our allies rather than our enemies. So are we, replied, so are we. He nodded politely and continued walking, leaving alone in the corridor with her thoughts. In the weeks that followed, his achievement became the subject of intense discussion throughout the academy. Instructors revised their training programs to account for human capabilities. Researchers requested access to his medical data to study persistence predation. Other species began to look at humans with new eyes, seeing not weakness but potential. Commander Al submitted a formal report to the Galactic Council recommending accelerated integration of humans into military programs. The report included footage from the simulation and a detailed analysis of methods. It concluded with a single sentence that would be quoted for generations to come. The humans have shown us that there are many ways to be a predator. We would be wise to learn from them before they have reason to hunt us. On the day of his official graduation from the academy, Morgan stood at the viewport of the station and looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, humanity was taking its first steps into a galaxy full of dangers and wonders and opportunities beyond imagination. They would face challenges. They would encounter species that dismissed them as weak. They would be underestimated and mocked and written off as insignificant. And then they would prove everyone wrong, just as they always had, just as they always would. Because humans were not the biggest creatures in the galaxy. They were not the fastest or the strongest or the most advanced, but they had something that other species were only beginning to understand. They had persistence. They had adaptability. They had the absolute refusal to ever give up. The galaxy had invited humanity to join its great community of species. It had no idea what it had really welcomed into its midst. But it would learn. Smiled at his reflection in the viewport, then turned and walked toward his next assignment. Whatever came next, he would face it the same way his ancestors had faced everything, with patience, with determination, with the quiet certainty that no matter how long the chase, no matter how difficult the prey, he would never stop moving forward. That was what it meant to be human. And the galaxy was just beginning to understand.